morning, everybody. Sorry about that goof. This is Kathy Mason from Masonworks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone. Today with my friend.
Coming through my phone too. Sorry about that.
This is Kathy.
Weird. Okay. Technological glyphs are normal around me, so let's just acknowledge that.
So I didn't even get to introduce you. This is Brooke Grove, and I got to meet Brooke from Jackie Arnold, who is my dear friend that has an IONS group and a Boulder Bees group here in Boulder, Colorado. And I am so delighted to meet her because she was on a panel for the World Unity Week for near-death experiencers. But we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff, not just that today. We're going to talk about all her superpowers. So, so Brooke, I'm so glad to get to know you. I feel like you are the perfect example for the highly sensitive woman doing it anyway.
Thank you. That's an awesome compliment.
Well, but do you think that's true? That's what it feels like. It feels like you're very sensitive and very aware. Your field is very expanded, but you're also out there doing stuff in the world, making a difference, helping people with your healing. Could you talk about that? I mean, because it really is something I think. And I'll preface this. I think everybody's going to become more and more empathic. And as the consciousness changes, as the light comes into the planet, as more people have mystical experiences. But not everybody's going to be brave enough to share their gifts. And you did.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful sentiment to begin with. Yet I always wasn't so brave. It took time. And I concur with you that we are all opening through this ascension portal, and that we all have a sixth sense, and or sixth and beyond, to be frank, and we're just stepping into our own superpowers, which we all possess. Right. Yet it is through recognizing that the things we've been indoctrinated with, the things we've been taught, the things that we think are normal are not necessarily the case. Our brains, our consciousness, our connection to source, whatever you choose to call the vernacular of the ineffable, it's beyond words, and we all have it. So stepping into it does become a superpower when we choose to do it. And for me, my NDE was definitely the catalyst that opened up a portal to gifts. And yet at the same time, I was a born empath, a born highly sensitive person. I had these gifts very early on, yet I was born into a family like so many persons wherein they meant well, yet their multi-generational way of being was religion. And Catholic religion, Roman Catholic, my family is actually Sicilian.
Italiano, sai.
Yeah, so because they were so deeply Roman Catholic, they were very invested in angels and Christ and all of these different ideas. My Labradorite's asking to move, which is strange, but okay. That said, they were very invested in all of that. And yet when I began to speak about my ability, like, hey, I felt Mother Mary, or hey, I saw an angel, or it was immediately shamed, immediately retracted. And at the same time, I'm being taught about the children of Fatima and like the gifts. So there was this very like conflicted message of it's okay when it comes through the Bible. It's okay when the church says so, but you speak about it, it's blasphemy. You speak about it, it's sacrilegious. And so my gifts really expanded as a child. And yet every time I actually spoke them out into the world, they were denied, they were shamed, they were invalidated. Again, I don't believe they did it from a place of intentional hurt. It was just they weren't able to receive it because they believed the mythology of what they'd been taught. Again, multi-generational transmission. And yet I have always been an outlier. I've always been a rebel. And so to me, it was like, this makes no sense. They're saying a snake and the woman did it. Like, what about the man? Like, come on, and I was 7 years old when I was in Catholic school, and I got kicked out of religion class for the first time. I barely spoke. The funniest part is everybody that knows me as a child, even people that know me in the NDE community. I was just talking to Peter Panagore prior to this.
I love him. Oh.
I love him to pieces, so I'll name drop him because we were literally just speaking. Okay. And we were joking about how when we met and he asked me if I spoke, and I'm like, of course, yeah, but I observe and then I speak.
Yep.
So I went to Catholic school from preschool all the way up until 18 and graduating. And yet when I was in first grade, they were telling the story of creation from the Catholic perspective, and they were focused on Eve and the snake, and I just lost it and spoke up. And my teacher, Sister Raymond, may she rest in peace, favorite nun I've ever encountered, she loved me and I loved her. But she was in shock because she's like, here's this little girl who doesn't talk. And all of a sudden I'm like, it couldn't just be the woman. I'm like, this whole church blames the women, and I just went off on a tangent, at which point I got sent to the principal's office, who was not a nice nun. And I just learned very quickly, you don't speak out against these things, not in this school, not in my family, not anywhere. Yeah. And so that was kind of when I started beginning to suppress my gifts. They still blurted out occasionally, the Italian in me, the hands and the need to speak.
That's right. That's so perfect. Well, and Peter Panagore is the perfect person to have had a conversation about all this with, because he has a process or a Sunday morning meeting on Zoom called Unchurch, and because he really feels that there's a whole bunch of us that have a direct connection to the mystical part of creation and don't really need to go through a secondary source, which is what we were taught as children. I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood, and we called the nuns the penguins. But no disrespect, guys. But but anyway, I know what that's like. I went to private girls' school too, but what I found is that I channeled a lot of that stuff since I really couldn't talk about it. I was aware of this huge field of reality, and I was talking to someone yesterday who's writing a book about sensitive women. Mm-hmm. Highly sensitive women. And we were talking about that. I mean, I still can go to a restaurant and hear what's being said at the tables around me. My field of, but it's so open. But it's a waste of energy. See,
well, when you're allowing it out, yes, that's where the energetic boundaries become so crucial. And as difficult as my reintegration years were post NDE, and I'm textbook as far as it took me about 7 years to actually begin to accept, integrate, and love my gifts. The first 7 years I was revolting against them. I mean, there were periods where I was profoundly in love with them, and then there were periods where I was absolutely terrified because it felt like I was on psychedelics all the time, as far as my ability to see auras, the quantum field, medical intuition, hearing people's thoughts. All the 4 C's came on for me. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the 4 C's, they're basically all of the psychic gifts. So you can hear, you see, you sense, and that was a lot for someone trained as a scientist, which is how I was trained prior. I was a clinical psychologist. And so I was constantly, as I've talked about in even interviews, like, am I oriented times 4, time, place, situation, etc. And I always was. And yet these experiences in psychology would pathologize me as either possibly psychotic and at best schizoaffective. And so I knew that. And I was constantly like, I have to be really careful who I talk to. I need to like keep this on the down low. And yet at the same time, there would be these periods where this information provided so much to expand my understanding. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, there was this familiarity with it coming from what we just talked about in the youth, wherein I felt like I'm me. Like I've compromised myself for so long to fit in. And I've always felt like an alien in this incarnation. And yet when I tap into this, I'm me. Like I'm really me. Yeah. And not only that, I've questioned the patriarchy since I was born. And maybe this is part of why, because the divine feminine has been denied. And the patriarchy did a really good job of writing that out of, history as much as they could.
Right.
And it's not, and I'm not anti-men in any way. I have 2 sons. I love them so much. I'm allowing them to be all that they are. And I'm also anchoring in the divine masculine within them. And because they're coming in at this particular period in time, they already have that. Like they're already up leveled because we're doing all the karmic work, all the generations prior. We've been doing it. Yet, so much of what I'm finding is that I spent so long, and I haven't acknowledged this here, but I've acknowledged it in many other talks. I'm a polytrauma survivor. And so having gone through prolific periods of sexual abuse, and that's all I'll say, trigger warning. That said, having gone through that, it takes so much of your power away. And then you come into this position wherein you realize that the feminine really is the divine mother, the birthplace, the root of so much of this life force energy and the ascension process that's occurring. And it's like, hey, you know what? They took my power away, but now I'm taking it back.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that aren't willing to speak about it. And I was terrified about speaking about it for quite a while. Yeah. Yet, why?
Right.
Because they said we can't speak about it?
No, I do think, don't you think that a lot of this is, again, about trusting that everything's, and I call it, and I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but I call it everything is in divine order. Mm-hmm. And that you were supposed to have those experiences, whatever trauma all of us have had. Totally. And we chose it, like we're up in non-physical and I think I'll do that this time. And but the thing is the game, if there is a game, is to push through it and use that as part of your superpower. And that's what happens. And that's why I started this conversation with how strong you are for a sensitive, because most sensitives are introverts. They write, they don't speak very much. They're subtle. They're very subtle. They're very bright. They usually they're getting so much extra information, so they assess and can see what's going to happen. And it's almost that I remember growing up going, don't they realize if they do that this is going to happen? And then I realized, oh, no one else sees that. Okay.
Yes. I mean, and especially as women, it's harder because we're taught that our voices don't matter as much, or that they're we're going to be questioned or victimized, for lack of better terms, and not trusted. That's really what it comes down to, is that the white male privilege, or whatever you want to call it, the patriarchy, has made it that women's voices of all colors, all races, and I own my own privilege. I'm a white woman. I get that I have privilege.
Right.
Based on that. Yet at the same time, as a trauma survivor, being female and then wanting to speak your truth, I was shamed. I was invalidated. I was told it wasn't real by my own family. Right. By the church, by anyone I reached out to. And one of my mentors always says that like less than 1% of people that went through what I went through actually ask for help. I asked for help repeatedly. No one listened to me. They all denied my story. Wow. And so I did go into a period of like extreme introversion, like suppression, just denying it all. And then I went through a period of undoing where it was like, oh, well, what I did in survival mode is how you now see me. Because it's true. They didn't believe my story, but then they believed what I did in survival mode was who I was. Wow. And when I was in survival mode, I was like anybody else in survival mode. You'll do anything to dissociate, to numb, to not be present while the abuse is ongoing. And, you know, I was judged for that. I was labeled for that, yet they wouldn't admit what I'd been through. And so I went into a period after I finally moved literally 3,000 miles away to get away from the abuse. Since nobody was protecting me and nobody listened, and I was scared to go to the authorities because of the violence that was involved and the threats. And so I moved 3,000 miles away. I changed my whole life. I end up going really deeply into academia, becoming a healer myself. And yet I still can't give voice to this aspect of self because there's so much shame involved. And it wasn't until I really sat with other trauma survivors, and I didn't intend to work with trauma survivors. I was placed there by my, at the time, graduate program. And so I was placed with trauma survivors. I told them maybe I shouldn't be working with them, so close to home. And they're like, no, it's great. And so I work with them. And at first it was great. Like there was like rapport happen in a second, and I could go really deep. But what I didn't understand as an unaligned empath, and there's a huge difference between an unaligned versus aligned empath. Right. I didn't know my sensitivities. I didn't know I was literally a sponge. And so they were giving me all their trauma and they were feeling so much better. But all it was doing was basically hooking and courting with all my own trauma. And I was holding it for them. And little by little, this is about at the age of 23, I got my master's very early. Little by little, the trauma starts to sink in. And by like 25, I'm starting to become immobile. I'm flaring up in the like all over the body, like gaining a bunch of weight, not able to move my joints, having lung issues, eventually kidney issues, eventually liver issues. All of this leads to my NDE. I had severe autoimmunity. And yet on some intuitive level, I kept saying to myself, this has to do with what I went through. This has to do with the work. I have to stop working. And my whole family thought I was nuts because at this point I'm in this very prestigious PhD program. I'm at the candidacy point. They've already given me the white coat with the doctor on it. Yet I just need to defend my dissertation. And I just kept feeling sicker and sicker and sicker. And that's when my NDE occurs. And it was because I wasn't speaking my truth. I was allowing everybody else's stuff to hook into mine. I didn't know there was a way to set energetic boundaries. No one teaches you that as a medical professional or a clinician. It's just not part of the nomenclature or the training. Wow. And so it's so fascinating now because when I started the practice I have now, which took many, many years, because I was so oriented to who I used to be. when I started the practice I have now, I thought everybody in clinical was going to call me woo-woo. They were going to want nothing to do with me. I was going to be like thrown out from my semi-Ivy League education. And what I've actually found is it's the opposite. They all want to protect. They're realizing I'm burning out. Something, the clinical boundaries don't work. And most people in the healing professions are wounded healers of some spectrum. Doesn't matter where they are on the spectrum, but they're there. And if they're empaths and highly sensitive people on top of it, and they've never learned to honor or own that capacity of self, and then therein are allowing all these energies in consciously or unconsciously, it creates a whole issue, not just for them, but the people they serve and the field in general. And I feel like that's what I'm here to preach about a little bit.
Oh, I love it. Well, okay. So there were so many ahas that you just said. One of the people I've worked with is somebody named Doyan, who has created, she was a survivor of constant sexual abuse growing up. And she would tell stories of, what do you do as a little kid eating cereal with your father at the breakfast table the next morning, pretending nothing happened. And but she has superpowers from it, from being able to get out of her body, and she helps all these people with PTSD. So sometimes, and she is a magical being. So I mean, some of this stuff is just amazing. And then Jade Raider is another person who does this stuff called clears, and it's KLEARS, and they're ways for empaths to clear, because I mean, it's a constant, where's the boundaries, who's, whether you're going to call in Archangel Michael and cut all the cords every morning and then reattach with your kids, whatever you want to do. But I think this is going to be something that everyone is, as we go and we evolve as a humanity, that more and more people are going to be empathic. That is the road to kindness and awareness, is that we're all one. And people are going to start being sensitive that have no skills and no clue how to do it, and be able to be somewhat of an observer, because that's the key to all of it, right? Is to be able to observe and then be present.
Yes. And so many are already there. They're just not cognizant of it because of all the stuff that's happening on the surface right now. And I don't mean to belittle what we've been going through the past 2 years, or nearly 2 years. But the reality is these shifts are occurring for our up leveling.
Exactly.
My then 7-year-old, when this all began, I went to explain to him what was going on. And this is my highly intuitive eldest. And he took my hand and he goes, "Spirit's already told me it's the great undoing." He's like, we lose to create. Don't be scared.
Perfect.
And like a little bit later, when now he's 8, we started talking about we read together the ancient texts from wisdom traditions. And so I read him the Vedic text on Kali Yoga, and they're all about this period that's coming before the golden age of consciousness, which is wherein there will be great destruction before there's great creation. And Kali often gets a bad rap because of how she's pictured. And yet the reality is she created from what she destroyed. And yes, exactly. And so it's a period of gestation, and you have to let go of things that aren't working. And so much of what's been going on for thousands of years is not working. And it's not just about, is it affecting females or is it affecting males? It's affected us all. Men have a way that they're supposed to be, which isn't really how they are meant to be. We're all meant to be a union of the feminine and the masculine.
Exactly.
And so they've suffered just as much, yet the only emotion they're allowed in this culture to express is often anger.
Right.
And thus they get termed toxic masculinity. Well, where did that come from? It came because that was all they were given. Like that was allowed. That was masculine. Whereas women, us being passionate, us being sensitive, us expressing ourselves, that was demonized as weak and all of these things. When in reality, that's the creatrix. That's the mother womb. That's the lineage. There would be no life without that.
Of course. And we're on the edge. I think the consciousness wants us to co-create with it. That's why we're here. And so everything's a birth. Everything is, okay. So one of the things I want to compliment you on is that you're so cool with your kids, because I mean, so many people like us, you and I grew up where we were afraid to talk about anything with our kids or excuse me, our parents, because of the consequences, because we tried. And I think we were trying to find love and kept going, well, how do you get love here? What's the game? I thought I came here to have love. Anyway, but what you're doing with your kids is you're allowing them to express themselves and honoring it instead of pushing it. I think a lot of parents, especially if they're not awake, they're not sure what to do with this information. They, say it's a past life, or, they instead of encouraging it. And you can always tell the families like that it's like everyone's on their way to be Christed. It's really cool. It's really cool.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. I mean, I think the traditional path that people have come through, which I call programming, is now going to be revealed that it wasn't truthful. And I've all along since I was little, I kept on saying the truth will be revealed. The truth will be revealed. I don't know what that means, but
it's like an X-Files episode, but it's true. I saw a meme recently, which was like normalize the paranormal, and I was like, preach. Because the so-called paranormal is actually normal. It's just that our senses, like, we have been indoctrinated and we have been told that these things that are beyond the way we're supposed to be, so that they can have some power over us, that they're not okay. And that's not true, because if you look at, as much as I'm not religious, if you look at the religions and the wisdom traditions, they all share a common core. Right. And that's knowing that there's something beyond us. Right. And that's because there is. The problem is they've gotten dogmatic and they've gotten into human, egoic stuff, and they lose their actual alignment with their purpose. Right. And then that's distracting. But the reality is, go ahead.
Oh, I think it's that they've created, it's almost like a paradigm shift where they created that's scary. It's like when you think about ghosts, rather than saying, oh, cool, somebody's going to come and talk to me, they made them scary. But
that's what they do with everything, like women in power. It's scary to have a woman that can have children and yet at the same time raise her voice and speak her truth and be out in the world. Like, you have to be one or the other. No, that's insane. Right. And if you look at the animal kingdom and even really ancient wisdom traditions, that wasn't the path. Exactly. The women were empowered. And something about organized religion chose to take us out of power. Why? It's not my place to say. And honestly, I don't care. Right. What I'm here to do is to say we can all be in unity. You can still have that faith. You can do whatever you believe in. But the reality is we need to step up together. We need to say this system doesn't work. it hasn't been working for a long time. If it worked, we'd all be happy. Is everyone
Right.
you know happy?
well, the thing is, like the way there's several things I wanted to say. One of the things is that we're all finding each other. Whether it's I had a spiritually transformative experience, but I was already awake at some level at 8. So but then I got popped out. You had near death experience, and both actions allow you to see a bigger opportunity where you see how much of you as a soul is not in this physical body, and that you can access that energy and focus it like a laser focus. You were already on the path for your PhD and all of the in the medical field. You were already on that path as a type A personality, and then you had your near death. But do you know what I mean? It's like, all of a sudden you have this expansive awareness of like, oh, I could create anything. And oh, let's see, what energy do I want to infuse into this today? And I'm serious, it's alchemy. It is true alchemy.
Total alchemy.
Yeah, fun. But there's a whole bunch of us. It's like the shutdown actually allowed us to find each other easier.
Well, that is true. Yeah. I mean, think about just conferences and things, any spiritual conference. Like we were people that already knew about that, and then we showed up together, and then suddenly we can't be together, and we're on the internet, and then all of a sudden all of these people are joining in that haven't had these experiences yet are oriented to the one because they already have that innate knowledge. We all have that innate knowledge.
Right. That's where we
all, yes. We're all craving, like so many people feel they're craving romantic love, or they're even self-love is like so overemphasized. But the reality is we're all craving the love of our creator.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you call the creator. You don't even have to believe in God per se, but to know that you came from something, right, and that something is bigger than you, and its love for you can carry and hold and contain all of the darkness in this realm. And then the beauty of that is that when you welcome it as, hey, yeah, these terrible things happen, but I am loved, and I'm gonna express love, and love is gonna carry me. Then alchemy, just as you said, in shamanic terms, we call it mother, sister, jaguar medicine, because it's she who goes deep, deep, deep into the underworld, but she never is in fear. She knows she's going to transmute any darkness into light. And that's exactly what we all have the capacity to do. But we're programmed by society to be told we can't, and that we need to go outside of ourselves. And the truth is, that couldn't be more wrong.
That's exactly.
We go inward. Inward is where we find the answers.
Exactly.
Inward's where God is.
Right.
Or God. Or source.
I did Avatar all the way through Wizards, and that's where I had my white light experience, or whatever you want to call it. And why I said that about how much bigger than we are, I realized when I saw this body, it was like an ant in this huge spotlight, and I was the spotlight. And I came back and went, okay, yeah, I'll use this one this time. But it was like, hey, how do I bring more of that spotlight? And I think of it every morning. It happened 16 years ago, or almost 17 years ago. And I already had superpowers before that I was playing around with. But the thing is how do you bring more of that in? So you help others as you walk in the world. It clears the field. It doesn't. You don't have to do much. You just be.
You really don't. You just yourself, and you let that light like shine out. And what I've learned as a poly trauma survivor is that there's such shame in that, and there's such social conditioning, and like you don't talk about that, and that's like bad, or you're bad, or all the like schemas that come up and are reinforced by society. But what I realized is that by talking about how I've shifted the pain, by talking about the experience of the pain becoming medicine, by being authentic in that, yes, I'm a healer. Yes, I've healed, but I'm still healing. That's my sacred trinity. Okay. Yet by owning it and smiling, because I'm going to smile. I've been actually like shamed by people on the internet for smiling as I talk about trauma. You know why I smile? Because I've overcome it. Because I have allowed trauma to become a teacher, an ally, a friend, and I've moved beyond it. I actually have gratitude for it. Not that the suffering, like the suffering was awful. Yet I have gratitude for the fact I was not a statistic. I had an oversoul, and I had a creator, and I had all of the divine assistance of my angelics and my guides, and it did not define me. Yes, I'm a polytrauma survivor, but I am a thriver more than that. And I have used it to become a teacher even more so. And that's why the light shines, because we're able to say, even in the darkness, I have stars.
That's right. That's right. Well, in all of it, you look at it more as a teaching. Like instead, when you get triggered, because you still get triggered, and working with other people allows you to see your stuff still. I mean, you're a teacher and a student, teacher and a student, teacher and a student.
Constantly.
Right.
Yes.
But the triggers are such a gift. And instead of being upset with them or the victim of everything, see that I think that's the role that really shifts as you go out of victimization to creator, and then co-creator when you can process it, because there's potency. There's a woman named Candace O'Denver who started a group. She's older, and she was like part of the very first big mainframe computer. Brilliant, only woman, brilliant woman. And she had this group called Balanced View. And they have like communities in Sweden and in California. And she said the potency in fear and anger is where all creation can happen. And if you can harness that, instead of being afraid of it and stuffing it away again, if you can harness that's it. And when she kept going, potency, what is she talking about? Until I got it. I didn't get that.
There's magic in it. There's, it's humans tend to think of our suffering as like this big burden we have to carry. And I've talked about this recently with some friends in the NDE community. Shift the word burden into blessing and watch how your whole life transforms.
Perfect.
Because yes, it's heavy, and yes, it has weight, but that weight isn't to bear you down. It's so that you feel, hey, something's heavy. How do I move it?
Exactly.
And then when you move it, you realize there's really nothing I can't move. There's nothing I can't shift. And that's not because I alone am some superhero. That's because I am a fractal of Source, and Source loves me unconditionally, and Source has my back.
Right.
And you feel that way when you choose to uplift it. If you choose to see it as a burden, it's really easy to say that this place is hell and there's nothing good here and yada, yada, yada. The programming we've all received, right?
Well, but if you're good here, then you get heaven later.
The reality is, I've seen heaven. It's amazing. I want to go back when it's my time. Yet heaven is on earth too. We bring it here. Our consciousness, our choices, what we choose to embody. We have the the gift and the opportunity to literally light other people up, to be heaven, to be earth angels, to be so much more than we've been taught we are. And it all begins by just throwing out that old programming and realizing they've been teaching us nonsense, and we are our master teachers, and we're divinely connected by this thread to source, and we can tap into it any way we want. And, you know, I hear countless people talk about how they need or they want, they desire, they crave this mystical experience or this touch or kiss or cosmic dance with God. But the reality is the only thing getting in their way is their mind.
Exactly. It's hard. It's from the heart.
It's all here. And there's nothing more that the divine wants than for you to recognize it, for you to ask for its support, and then for you to start sharing it in service to others. And when you start sharing it in service, it's like, oh my God, that's when you start to understand the power of the quantum, because it's just like you leap in directions you'd never imagined, because suddenly you're aligned with the thing you are, the source, the energy, and that energy is contagious and people are hungry for it. And then you feel really good because all of a sudden what you're giving out is feeding you too. So you're giving and you're receiving, and that's exactly what source designed us for.
Perfect. I love this. And I love, there's so many things that you're saying that are so supportive of everyone that is here. This audience is a lot of small business owners that are conscious businesses, and they are servant leaders. They have, they spend a lot of their time doing whatever they can to serve their employees as well as their customers. And when they're looking for a way to recharge or reconnect, this is hearing stories of people reconnecting, hearing processes that you can use to shift your state when you're out of balance. All of that is so useful for people, and it can change in a minute. So that's why I really, Brooke, I wanted to ask you about talking about the art of spiritual science, so that people, if they might want to work with you, that they would get an idea of what that is. Because you can see Brooke has, she has created a path for someone else to follow that could be the key to you being self-actualized, to you being really having a mystical experience within yourself. So could you talk about the art of spiritual science?
Yes, it evolved from my NDE and my love affair with psychology, which began at a very young age. I was very attracted to depth psychology and Jungian psychology and archetypal psychology very young, as well as the arts. And then when I had my NDE, those were the only types of psychology that still resonated with me. Right. I had the clinical, I had all this other training, and yet none of it made sense. But I still resonated with like this deeper archetypal knowing. And from that, I knew I wasn't destined or I wasn't aligned anymore with being a clinical psychologist. But I knew there was so much merit in what I had learned. And that even though I chose eventually, after a very painful, long, extended time, to walk away from my candidacy, I knew that while they couldn't take the education away, I wasn't aligned with it. So I was going to do something else. And because my NDE had given me so many gifts between being able to see the quantum field, the auras, medical intuition, all of the psychic capacities, I started to get playful with spirit. And I was like, how can I utilize, like integrate these two? Psychology's very earth-based. It's very practical. It allows for the mind, which is where most people are stuck. They're stuck here. And yet these gifts I was given, like they were playful and I could use them to change things in my entire field. Well, if I could do that for myself and overcome my own mental constraints, what might I be able to do with others? And so it all began as like an experiment on myself. I studied heuristic research in my doctoral degree. And so that helped because I was able to use myself in an immersive process and study it. And then from that, it evolved. And I realized I could do, utilizing the gifts Spirit had given me, I could do about an hour to 2 hours, depending on what I'm working with, of this vibrational medicine combined with the quantum field, combined with the shamanic work that I went and trained in. And I could utilize this space to really make massive shifts in the subtle bodies. And then from there, the subtle bodies are great. There's tons of energy practitioners that are proficient. Right. The issue is people go out and they expect instantaneous healing, or they expect that's all they've got to do. The reality is you still have to actually keep yourself clear. And in order to keep yourself clear, you need to understand how you got there. That's when psychology comes in. So I'm able to take this integrative like approach where I work with the people for an hour or two in their fields, in the quantum, clearing ancestral. It goes deep, the quantum across all time and space, and karmic, and then the here and now. Yet then we go in and I'm like, and I give them the information. I usually get about 12 to 14 pages from Spirit as I'm working. Wow. Of information that's coming through. And then I literally will just sit with the person for an hour afterwards and I'll tell them, hey, here's what I observed. Here's what Spirit says. How's this resonate? They tell me what resonates or what doesn't. And then that's when the psychology comes in. Because I'm able to say, okay, well, here's a pattern from yada, yada, yada. And while you might not see it here and now, this pattern, let's look at what's happening in your field and what we just cleared. This isn't just you. This has come in from like 4 generations. And your response to it is continuing the cycle, not because you did anything wrong. Right. You were literally trained, programmed, and conditioned to do these things. But now that you know, and we've cleared, let's give you some homework assignments and let's let you go out into the world in a different way. And what I always tell persons, and they're often hesitant to believe until they've done it a while, is you change these little teeny things. They don't seem big in the beginning, but you change these little ways of being in alignment with the clearing. And you continuously do it, you have a ripple effect on every single person around you. So entire family systems can change because you've altered the ancestral lineage. Perfect. And, and it's nothing new, truly. I mean, I combine psychology with the vibrational medicine, but this is the wisdom of the ancient traditions. They knew this. Yes. So it's really us bringing back this divine feminine knowledge, this earth medicine that we always had, but dogmatic, systemic religion. And again, it has its place and it works for who it works for. But when it gets too rigid and when it tells us that there's certain ways of being that we can't indulge in, for example, the type of work I'm talking about, I've had religious people tell me I'm doing devil's work. No, I'm not doing devil's work. I'm calling in Christ half the time I'm doing the work. Right. I'm working with the ascended masters. This is not devil's work in any way, shape, or form. This is what we have the power to do. The angelics are here to support us. Our higher self is here to support us. And what I always tell my clients is the highest compliment you can pay to me is to book a session or 2 or do a package if you have more immersive work, and then go out and continue to heal yourself, because the all true healing is self-healing. Exactly. All I am here to do is guide you, inspire you, remind you of your own divine remembrance of what you're capable of. Yay.
That's perfect. And I think that is this period that we're in the Dark Ages and coming back to the Renaissance. And what you're talking about is using traditional therapy with, I call it indigenous alchemy, as a way to clear out all the constructs, and they may be contracts and agreements that you made that no longer serve. So all of that work, I found that very liberating when I've done that work with people, as a patient. Not, I don't do that in my work, but so Brooke, let's talk a little bit about your NDE and the conference now, if we can segue. Although I will have to do this again because I love all of this. And I have there were so many other things we could have talked about divine feminine, divine masculine, all of that. But let's go to the conference so that we don't forget to talk about that. I want everyone to know that Brooke is in the virtual IONS conference, which is starting. There is a Reiki class on September 1st. There's a series of classes from healers and practitioners on the 2nd of September. And then the 3rd through the 5th, there are over 100 speakers at this amazing IONS conference this year in September. And Brooke, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Sure. I am speaking on the 3rd, which is so beautifully aligned for me because I was comatose for 3 days. And 3 is a very significant number for me in my spiritual evolution. Also 333, a beautiful angel number. That said, I am speaking on the morning of the 3rd with PMH Atwater, Jeff, I always confuse the Jeffs. Jeff O'Driscoll, Jeff Olson. I'm going to go Jeff O'Driscoll and Jeff Olson, so I don't mess up which one likes to be called Jeffrey, because I constantly mess that up. Sorry, guys. Love you. But them, and then also Jeff's son, Spencer Olson. And so what we are speaking on is how the wisdom of NDEs nourishes our children.
Wow, that's so perfect. That's so perfect. Oh my God.
And it's so, if you want to talk about divine alignment, when I was going through my reintegration process and found out I was pregnant, like literally right after I came back, and I had seen my children in my NDE, which anyone that wants to hear that whole story, just YouTube Brooke Grove NDE. There's a couple on my unborn children in my NDE. But that said, my eldest actually came through right after my NDE when I was struggling to reintegrate. And I was at my first IANS conference, and I had lunch with Bruce Grayson, and he noticed that I was wearing sunglasses, and he commented on my sunglasses. He still teases me about my sunglasses. But because at conferences, I tend to always wear them all these years later. But that said, my son came through then, and I started to like feel his presence, and I knew immediately he was an intuitive because I was picking up information that was very different than what I would pick up. And so I reached out to PMH and actually worked with her, because I never expected to be speaking about this and like doing this work. And so I reached out to her and had a session with her, and she works with so many people. Of course, that wasn't necessarily something she remembered. And then I did a talk with our moderator of this particular panel, and she happened to hear it. And she was so impressed by it that she put me in her newsletter and like reached out to me. And that's how this whole panel was born. But I said to her, I was like, way back when I was struggling, I reached out to you, and I reached out to your research, and it helped me with my reintegration process. So the fact I'm on a panel with you now, and we're sharing about how this, and you consider me an expert on after effects reintegration, it's such an honor.
Oh, isn't that cool? And her energy is so amazing. I mean, a lot of the researchers, it's sort of, let's be professional. And then there's PMH. There's people that get it, that we're supposed to be playing here, that this
and
was
having Yeah. Totally. And then and what I wonder about is like from that, I believe sprang forth the second part of what I'm doing for IONS this year. No one's told me. I'm just intuitively reading into this. I am the moderator for the After Effects and Integration panel.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
that's because I've spent most of the past 7 years talking about how difficult my after effects and reintegration were. And that's where PMH really like gave me a spotlight when she found me through that interview. So yes, I'm really excited because the persons that happen to be on that panel, some of them I met during my own reintegration.
Right.
And the other ones I've got to witness their recent integration. And the bulk, well, not a bulk, but about half of my practice is helping new experiencers be re-embodied. And so I offer services and ceremonies to help people come back in and honor the ritual, because what I found, or what was lacking for me, is in this culture, we don't honor transitions. Like we've lost that. Only in certain, and that's a beautiful thing about certain religions, is that they do honor transitions to certain phases. But as a whole, American culture has not celebrated transitions. And what I found coming back from the NDE is it's really difficult to talk about. There's only so many people it's safe to talk about. Right. And so many experiencers, that's why they don't talk about it for 20 or some years, because they don't feel safe. And so I created a ceremony wherein we re-embody the soul, and we honor that you were in another place and you no longer are that person. You've come back. It's like it's both a re-embodiment and rebirthing ceremony. And then I teach them afterwards how to work with the after effects.
Fantastic. I think this is really a wonderful gift that IONS does every year. This is our second year that we're doing it virtual, which there is a huge benefit to that. When you go to a live conference, the energy and the heart of everybody in the room, the energy is just off the charts. I just love them.
Yeah.
And the hugs. Yeah. But it's also the heart. It's like, feels like home. It feels like home. You're around all those people. But then the virtual actually still had that incredible energy. Plus, in the virtual, there's 4 different Zoom rooms, and in the physical, there's 4 or more different things going on at the same time. But in the virtual, you get the recordings. So you have 90 days after you watch it. So you don't have to really miss anything, and the upliftment of your energy and of your consciousness is off the charts. When you're around people like Brooke that have, it's good news, you guys. This is all going to work out beautifully. You're a divine being. You have superpowers. You could spend the rest of your life discovering all the ways to use them. I mean, there's so many positive things that are going on to focus on, rather than the other narrative, which hopefully will be changing very soon. It feels like it's really soon. And so use this information that Brooke has and these other beings of light that have touched the other side and come back with good news. I mean, that's really what it was, right?
No, totally. And the beautiful thing also is, like, for so many people, especially during the pandemic and what we're going through now, conferences are expensive. In person, you got to fly there, you got to pay for the conference fee, you got to eat, et cetera, et cetera. With the virtual, you don't have to worry about any of that. And right now it's still an early bird special. So IONS, I'm plugging you, sign up before August 12th and you get a much better deal. And I mean, it's just amazing. And as an experiencer and an attendee and a speaker myself, I always had to struggle, be like, oh, do I want to go to this? Do I want to go to that? And also being a sensitive and an empath, I was always like, oh, I feel rude leaving if this one wasn't resonating, especially if it's in a small room. But with this, you can watch the whole thing and then come back and stream another one for 90 days, as you've already shared. So it's amazing. It's a great opportunity. It's really, I mean, it's always been an international organization, but because now it can literally be at all time zones, you can show up in your pajamas. Like, it's amazing. Come as you are. Be as you are. Receive the light. There's no judgment.
Last year was unbelievable, and this year's even better. And this, I'm part of the group that meets once a week to put it on. So I am so excited, and I just thank you so much, Brooke, for what you bring and the opportunities for people to elevate and increase their happiness and joy. While they're here in physical, you're making a big contribution. Every time you speak and you let that frequency out, there's a chance someone will catch that wave and use it for themselves. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so honored to talk with you and all the work you're doing too. Thank you so much.
It's fun. Yeah, this is what we came here for. This wasn't supposed to be that pity party stuff. We're supposed to be co-creating with the universe at the cutting edge.
They say the gods are jealous of persons who get to have this earth walk here and now. And I believe there's truth to that. And I feel that that's lost on people that are stuck in the hardship. But the reality is the gods are jealous because we have an opportunity to change everything. And that's exciting.
Yes.
So accept that invitation and dance with it.
Yes. Okay. So I want to make sure everyone's seeing BrookeGroveHealing.com, which is on the banner. I also put it in the comments. But Brooke, is there any other way for people to reach you besides your website?
Yes, I have a small Instagram account. I keep it small consciously because I really share my own writing there and my own healing process. But I do that to model for others that we don't come back here fixed from the other side. We have to work through our own shadow. So if you're interested in reading any of that, it's at Brooke Grove Healing, spelled just like the website, on Instagram. And I do request that you send a message as to why you'd like to join, or I'll scan the photo with your permission just to make sure it's an energetic alignment. I've consciously kept it small. Also, I have recently created a YouTube channel. It is very much in gestation, but it's Brooke Grove Healing as well. I'm doing Free Flow Fridays, which are just where we talk about whatever's coming up for whoever shows up. And that's been really fun. And in the fall, after conference season and my own client schedule calms down a bit, I'm going to be putting up a lot of more teaching oriented videos on shadow work, integration, After Effects. I'm kind of letting the audience talk to me a bit about what they want, but I'd love for you to subscribe and join us and get notifications for new videos. So yeah, that's what's going on. And I have a book in the works. Everyone always asks me this, so I'm just going to say it. I've been working on it since my NDE, which was 10 years ago, yet it is not an NDE specific book. It is on trauma recovery, the gap in care, and NDE, how to reintegrate from an NDE after trauma, because so many trauma survivors, we dissociated when we were children. So to come back after an NDE, it's very easy to go straight out. And so what I found when I came back was that there was absolutely no assistance in how a trauma survivor reintegrates. And so that's really my area of expertise. That's what I work with in my practice a lot. And that's what my book is on.
Wonderful. I can't wait to hear more about that. And
thank you, Kathy.
Yes, thank you. And I will see you soon. I will see you in 3 weeks at the IONS conference. And please, I'd love to do this again. There's so many cool things more we could share, that you're just a wonderful, wonderful resource for everybody. Thank you so much, Brooke. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy. It was an honor.
Okay. See you soon.